Storytelling and Neuro coupling, unveiling the science behind engaging narratives. Join us for an interactive workshop that transcends traditional communication boundaries. This dynamic session goes beyond theory, immersing participants in hands-on activities that include collaborative story building and engaging storytelling practice. Nathan is a training specialist at Oregon State University and has delivered 150-plus presentations across the Pacific Northwest, utilizing wacky and unique stories to engage students, families, and administrators. He worked abroad for 7 years as a TEFL teacher and community organizer, and has always used stories to build connections across cultural divides. Tiffany Prizzi, M.A., is Global Learning's Assistant Director and has designed international programs and advised undergraduates studying abroad for more than 4 years at WSU. She teaches online courses for study abroad hopefuls and was invited to conferences in Eugene, Spokane, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. to deliver seminars. Tiffany is also a Crimson Spirit Award winner. Please welcome Nathan and Tiffany.
Whoever wrote those intros, thank you for that. Feels special. All right, well, thanks for joining us, everyone. We are happy to be here and talk about storytelling and neurocoupling. We've been giving this presentation a few times over the last few years, mostly because Nate, our study abroad outreach coordinator, and would give new Coug orientation sessions to all the new Coug students coming in every summer. And he would just tell stories, and that was the most engaging way that we were able to recruit students to study abroad over the last few years. Maybe some of you were even in that room. It's possible. So we kind of birthed this presentation out of that, and we presented it a few times. And after hearing what the Neuro Symposium theme was this year, we definitely wanted to spotlight storytelling with y'all. So thank you for having us. So today we're going to just go over a couple of different things here. We're going to use storytelling kind of as a strategic presentation tool, kind of help you guys form your own way of presenting as you kind of grow into your careers or further into your careers. And we're going to do some storytelling in little breakout sessions. So no one leave. Breakout sessions I know is scary, but promise we'll make it fun. And then we'll kind of create some ways for y'all to take storytelling strategies outside of this room. First off, we're going to do a little story time. Nothing about a storytelling presentation without some stories. We're going to talk about neurocoupling. We're going to have y'all do your own stories. Come on in. The front row is empty for y'all. And then we'll talk about some strategies. All right, Nate, take it away.
Okay. So I'm going to tell y'all a story about a time when I did something with my eyes closed. Okay. This story takes place in 1999 in the East Bay. So I grew up in the city of San Lorenzo. It's like a little place in the East Bay, just across from San Fran. And I grew up in this little neighborhood, and I was one of 12 boys who lived on our street. So I had a really, really great childhood. I was outside most every day. And one of the things from my childhood that I remember the most was a bike that I had. It was yellow with black splotches, kind of like what you see here. And I'll never forget this bike because I used to put duct tape on the wheels, so that way when I went down the street, I could pedal backwards and brake real fast, and I could just skid out and fishtail like 30, 40, sometimes 50 feet. And so I would put duct tape on and I'd wear the duct tape out until it got back down to the tread of the rubber, put more duct tape on. And this bike was sweet because it even had like a little frame at the front with these little neon lights that would light up. So I would just cruise around feeling awesome in this bike. And one day I got this great idea that I was going to try and ride my bike with my eyes closed. And the street that I lived on, it was called Via Medea. And like I said, it wasn't like that busy of a street. We played in the street a lot. And I just was kind of used to there not being a lot of cars around. But in the distance point here, there was a street called Kavanaugh Drive where the cars would go maybe 45 miles an hour. And I was starting down here, and I kind of told myself, I want to see how far I can make it down the road pedaling with my eyes closed. And I will know when I've reached that intersection when I hear cars honking at me. I was 10 years old, okay? So I hopped on the bike. I was like, okay, let's do this. I like buckled my chin strap. So I started pedaling. I started picking up speed. I started feeling good. And right around the time I started asking myself, ooh, I wonder how far I've gone, is when, bam! And I woke up on the ground and I was seeing stars like a Looney Tunes cartoon. I just remember like splotches of red and yellow and blue. And it was a day I'll never forget, but it's also, it's just a little reminder for when I have kids, like I'm going to make sure I tell stories so that they know not to ride their bike or try many things with their eyes closed. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm kidding.
All right. So there's a couple different benefits to storytelling that we'll kind of dig into in our presentation. The first of which I always want to highlight is igniting curiosity. Hearing Nate's first half of his story, I'm always like, what on earth were you doing having your eyes closed, riding a bike? What 10-year-old thinks of that? I guess I had a different childhood a couple miles down the road. But also, it increases memory. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with neurocoupling in a slide or two. But it also lets us indulge our imagination. We took this guide right here from a K through 12 teaching guide. And so I think it's pretty obvious that like if we're using something that's for primary education, we can always indulge our imaginations a little bit more. And that's kind of why we took from a teaching guide, because that is kind of where imagination stems from. So just reminding all of us that to go back to our childhoods and do some imagining, and storytelling kind of bring that out a lot of different ways. A lot of you guys I noticed were like in rapture. Nate's story kind of put you on pause. No one was on their phones. I looked around the room a little bit, and y'all were like gazing up at him as if he was telling the funniest story. I didn't think it was that funny, but I've heard it a few times, so it's probably timing too. But listen, his ego doesn't need any more stroking, so next time he tells a story, you don't have to look at him. Be on your phone next time. I appreciate it. But seriously, no one was on their phone, and that's the benefit to storytelling. Is it's a different way of presenting the information so that people can take what they're hearing and process it kind of differently in different segments than what we're used to kind of in just a general lecture format. And again, it does stimulate our brains. So hearing a story, being able to laugh every couple of minutes while we're hearing a story, or empathize or feel that gets our brains working a little bit differently. All right, so going into the neuroscience of storytelling, I want to just preface this by saying I never took a neuroscience class in college. I'm not a neuroscientist whatsoever, neither is Nate. I am just here to kind of synthesize the research as we understand it. But I do think it's important to add the neuroscience lens here too. Sometimes I feel like we think about storytelling as like a kid's endeavor, but really it's an important tool that we can use as we talk about ourselves and talk about our careers and go forth and do projects and what else. So just know that I'm not a neuroscientist. Look up the research yourself if you're super interested in this. But neurocoupling is the way that brains talk to each other. So you are able to kind of perceive someone else's emotions and feelings when they tell their story because your neurons in your brain are firing at the same rate. It's a dopamine hit, so to speak. So when you are hearing a story and the person telling the story is relaying something funny or something happy or something joyous, your brain is also picking up on that and reacting the same way. So you are going to dopamine hit hearing Nate's story about falling in a parked car. You should believe it or not. So it's the way that we respond to characters in a story. For those of you that are into horror movies, maybe this is when you realize that you're a masochist after all. But just so you know, like to synthesize all of this, the way that we experience a story together is how we remember the story's importance and then take that lesson with us afterwards. And that's what I think we really want to get do in the presentation is really to tell a story so that the person hearing the story from you remembers what your story was, whatever it is, and takes that lesson with them when they go, whether that be an interviewer remembering your story in an interview and hiring you because of it. Last slide here, qualitative significance of storytelling. Just want to remind everyone that before there was a written language, there was oral history. It is the oldest form of history that we have. We have taken on the generational impact of telling stories a little bit differently these days, but it's still there at its foundation. Telling our family's history to our kids. Nate, your kids learning about your bike incident is definitely a family history that I think you should share. But there's also important qualities that we can take from someone's story. Whether or not we take compassion, empathy, understanding from any story remains to be seen, but other qualities exist too. So just that in mind. And last but not least, I'll end with, in a world where we're constantly like taking in new information, new information is being created. We're on TikTok until the lady pops up and is like, "Are you keep scrolling? You've been at it a while." With all that new information, storytelling becomes more and more valuable because it cuts through that noise. So it's just remember that at the end of the day, storytelling helps your brain weed out what's not important and helps you focus on what is important. So let's practice. Everyone want to get into pairs of 2 or 3? Let's do 3. 2?
2 or 3, whatever is easiest at your group.
Yeah.
And once you're in your group 2 or 3, just elect someone as your group leader. Yeah.
Okay.
So group leader, go ahead and distribute these to your group and just take the next slide. We'll just kind of, if I was a Zoom box, put me in the top right corner as you're looking over with your group. Sometimes when I chat with students, when I chat with adults, and I say, "Hey, storytelling could really improve your presentation or your elevator pitch or whatever it might be," most people think, "Well, I don't have any good stories to tell." The hardest thing about telling a story is identifying which one might work for whatever situation, because we are full of them. You need the right sort of prompt to go, "Oh yeah, I kind of remember that time." So in your groups, take this minute, make sure you get your eyes on every card, pass them around, and just see if one of these makes your brain go, "Bing," and you go, "Oh yeah, I remembered something," and then just hold on to that. So you can talk amongst your group, take a look, take 30 seconds. So there's a lot of prompts out there. It's like a diverse set of prompts, but some of the ones I saw were traditions, challenge, food, hot mess, risk, growing pains, comfort zone. Not only are these questions that are going to come up in interviews, these are questions that are leading a small team, leading an organization, in a nonprofit, leading a company, running a meeting for the community. These are things that can help keep your group focused on you and can help you reinforce whatever the message is you're trying to give to your group. And sometimes just having something like traditions remind you, "Oh yeah, I do have traditions. Oh yeah, we do have funny moments," or like things went wrong and things are prompted. We're going to practice in our groups telling our own stories. So what's going to happen is whichever one or two or whichever one you like best kind of ping to memory, kind of isolate that and think about how you can tell that in about a minute, maybe 2 minutes. Like we don't need the novel version. We just need a quick list workshop. So just kind of think what you're going to tell your group in a minute or 2, and then we'll start. I'll just get Raymond. Actually, just raise your hand if you know what story you're going to tell. Okay, sweet. So team leader, who in your group's going to go first, second, and third if you're in a group of 3. I'm going to put 1 minute timer on Ish, and I'll let you know when the next person should be starting. If you're in a group of 2, then you do have 1.5 minutes each to tell your story. There. Is everyone ready? This is a little warm. Sometimes we have to be jolted or jostled a little bit to be like, "Oh yeah, man, I'm full of stories." Like a lot of stuff has happened. Some stuff a lot of things have happened this semester even that hopefully we'll remember one day. We're going to dive into the strategy behind storytelling, just so you'll have a chance in a few minutes to then apply that strategy to the story you just told. We're going to kind of go through the story arch, and I'm going to use references from the story about a time when I did something with my eyes closed to see what popped out or what you remembered. This story arch, if you Google storytelling arch, you could get it in like 3 details, 5 details, 7 details, 9 details. The point is, you start the story and eventually the story ends. And there's kind of some action at the top and you cruise to finish. So I've just chosen one, but you can apply this in whatever way you think makes sense to your story. But we start every story, most of the time, with a good hook. These work really well for rap songs. These work really well for most songs. These work great in presentations too. My hook was kind of meh. I just said, oh, this is just something I did with my eyes closed. And everyone was like, huh, I don't know. But I've heard people say, I'm going to tell you a story about a life or death experience. I'm going to tell you a story about, insert anything there. When you're in a presentation and it's maybe a bit more formal like this, it is totally okay to start out just by saying, hey, y'all, I'm going to tell you a story. A lot of people, that's a good enough hook because finally someone is just not going to yap, yap, yap. So feel free to start that however you wish. Although if you have a creative hook, or maybe if your partner think of a creative hook for you soon, you can use that. But what's most important to keep people hooked after you've kind of told them you're going to tell a story is you have to include vivid details. Can anyone shout out some of the details I used with my story? Anything you remember? Anything at all? Yellow bike spots. Yellow bike with spots. Yes. Duct tape tires.
Street names and speeds.
Street names, speeds, buckling my helmet, closing my eyes. Anything else? Yeah.
Like seeing colors and like tasting blood and stuff.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Nice. Anything else? Fishtailing, crashing.
Neighbor lady coming out.
One more time.
The neighbor lady coming out.
The neighbor lady coming out, checking on me. I was pretty strategic when I chose my details. I chose things that I knew would touch the 5 senses and the things we feel to be human. I mentioned tasting blood. I used a visual of splash, three images on my screen. Now, you might have a PowerPoint available or not. I've told that story without a PowerPoint, and it still works just as well. But it helped, right? I told you I lived in San Lorenzo. I was like, here's where we are. Here's here. And street view, Looney Tunes, seeing stars. I mentioned bloody lip. I talked about the tread on the handlebars. Anything I could do to bring you back into that moment with me so you could feel like you were there too. And that's where neuro coupling comes into effect. And that's where your brain starts firing in a similar pattern to mine. And you start going like, oh man, okay. It's a short story, but you were there with me. So when you are, ramping up to like the climax of your story, think about using details that we see, smell, touch, taste every day. That can go a long, long way. And be as descriptive as you'd like. At the top of your story, there's a peak. I was cruising down the street, eyes closed, thinking, I'd make it to this busy street. The stories that you told, I don't know what, honestly, such a jagged mountain, and it was just a nice little hill. I only gave you a couple minutes to prep. But there's got to be a point of your story where folks go, oh, okay, sweet. And then you kind of cruise down after that to your central message, and then eventually to your outro. When you're giving a presentation, it is important that you only deal with one central message. If you try and tell too many at the same time, you might lose your track. Other people might lose your track. I started with just saying, hey, I did this with my eyes closed, and I finished. I will tell this to my future kids when they think of things with their eyes closed. So honestly, message in general safety, and just to kind of highlight safety with kids. And that's like an easy thing to take away amidst all those details and amidst everything else that went on. If you have trouble determining what your message is, you can use these prompts, but I encourage you to boil down your message to 7 words or less. And if you don't, you can conclude your story with something that simple. It ties it together nicely. when you're going to go give a presentation for a project, or you're going to report on a case study you did, or whatever, you can think about what that message is you want your audience to walk away with, and then you can work backwards if you want. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just kind of whatever works for you. So I did my best to follow this entire thing, and over the course of just like 3 minutes, I think I managed to hit them, and everyone was pretty engaged. We're going to take a second go at our stories, but I want us to use this image to just bolster them a little bit. Our goal is to apply these strategies to the story we just told. Your partners are going to help you do that too. They might have like the best hook for you that you could never think of. Usually when I go to tell a story, I just ask Tiffany, what hook would you use? And I let her choose for me because, perspective's great. Having a buddy help is not illegal. So we're going to take the next 5 to 7 minutes in our groups. Why don't we do this? The first 2 minutes of that, y'all can talk about the strategy you're going to apply to the story. And then the last 5 minutes, you're all going to tell it one more time. Okay? Are there any questions? Okay, sweet. Tiffany and I will be walking around the room. So if you're stuck, befuddled, you're like, oh, what would you use for a hook? Or like, what do you think? I can give any thoughts you wish. But take the next 2 minutes with your group to see how you can apply to.
Thank you, everyone, for telling your stories to your partners. As we kind of wrap up here, just want to make sure that y'all have a good idea of what you can tell when it comes time to tell your story. So one of the ways that we in Global Learning have been doing is our Stories from Abroad Instagram account. So you'll see on your card at the very bottom, we have a little plug to our Instagram account that Lara actually runs for us this semester. So would love to have you follow us. But that's just one way that we're getting at WSU. Well, thank you for coming.
Those cards are yours, by the way.
Yeah. Take them with you.
And if you didn't get any, we have more. If you want to.
Thank you.
You didn't get any.
Okay.